welcome to this video in which I'm going to take you through why it's more important to segment your audiences based on belief rather than anything else. It's far more powerful, and there's a really simple reason why, and I'm going to take you through it in just a moment. So, my name is Rob. I'm the founder and CEO of Source 9 Insights. We're a strategic insights agency that helps good people do amazing things with emotion, understanding behavior, and creating emotional value. In this video, we're going to talk about beliefs. I'm going to show you a very simple way of thinking about why segmenting based on belief is far more powerful than doing it in other ways, such as demographics and so on. So let's get into it. On this slide, there's a few ideas here that I'd like to share with you. So it's really all about cause and effect. It's about how we make sense of the world, how we give things their meaning, and then what that does to affect behavior. So we've got behavior here at the bottom of the causal chain, and up at the top we've got our paradigms. So we encode the world based on our beliefs. The way that we've been raised, the education that we've had, the culture that we've grown up in, the things that we think are important. There's a wonderful book by David McCraney called How Minds Change, which I thoroughly recommend you read, which synthesizes a lot of the research on perception and just the psychology of meaning making. And in that, it becomes quite clear that we often confuse reality for our beliefs about reality. And it's this whole idea of confusing the map for the territory. They're two very different things. The way in which we perceive the world is thoroughly shaped, filtered, distorted, affected by the cultures that we live in, by our values, our identities, where we live, who we live with, from when we're born. And in previous videos I've mentioned this, called it like this idea of lenses of belief, that we're all looking through these very unique prescriptions of what the world is and the meanings that we attribute to it and how we make sense of it. Now it turns out that quite a lot of people will share similar prescriptions of belief, and that's why I think it's so important to think about segmenting based on that. Just a quick note to say that the beliefs themselves are parts of paradigms. So when we talk about paradigm shifts that occur, say in science, Copernican revolution, Einstein's overturning of Newtonian physics with this relativism, can I even say that? I think so. These big shifts that happen, it's because there's something happening right up the top of the causal chain, upstream of most of our thinking. Again, I think there's an Einstein quote, or very often misquoted to Einstein, this idea that we can't solve our problems with the same level of thinking that caused them. And this is a similar thing. It's this idea that quite a lot of what we do happens downstream of big paradigm ideas, the things that we take completely for granted. So paradigms are sets of beliefs, and then beliefs themselves are sets and containers that limit and filter the world around us, through which we make sense of the world. Example of this, there's been some great work done by More in Common, a non-profit that was set up after the MP Jo Cox was assassinated in her constituency. The idea here in setting up More in Common, a quote from her in the House of Parliament, saying that we have more in common than that which divides us. And what they did was they came up with a way of surveying people based on some key variables that can then allow people to be put into different categories, different segments based on their beliefs. Now this is used a lot in the non-profit world, and it's a great example of how segmenting by belief is really, really powerful. And I'd encourage people in the for-profit world to come up with their own segmentations, and by all means give me a call to help you do that. But let's have a look at what More in Common do. So they've come up with these groupings. So progressive activists, civic pragmatists, disengaged battlers, established liberals, loyal nationals, and disengaged traditionalists. Oh, and one more, backbone conservatives. Now, they have a survey design that essentially works out where people stand on really, really key core beliefs and values. And then they worked out patterns across the population. And then they worked out which of those long list of questions are statistically significant to create a shorthand for moving people into those different groups. And they've created that. We've used this a lot with non-profit groups that are looking to understand how better to communicate climate change, and it's been incredibly useful. The guys at Britain Talks Climate Outreach do this, and it's fantastic. Go check them out too. So, to go back to what I was saying before, when we categorise by belief, which we can do through screener surveys, we are able to think about people in terms of their shared beliefs. Think about people, therefore, in terms of their shared ways of making meaning in the world, which really is just to say that the people in these different segments kind of share the same reality. They share the same subjectivities, or as I like to say, because I don't really think there's anything in terms of human understanding that is thoroughly objective, they share subjectivities. So there's an intersubjectivity going on within these different segments. And identifying what these intersubjectivities are and categorizing people within them means that you're able to talk to people in ways that are aligned with and relevant to their way of making sense of the world. So it's far more empathetic, far more conducive to inspiring action, connecting, developing understanding, and so on. Another reason why this is so important is because our beliefs give rise to our narratives. So depending on what we believe, depending on how we make sense of the world, we then start telling stories about the world, because it's through story that we piece together these different events in time in such a way to give it meaning and to understand it. Now, when we do that, those narratives, those stories that we're telling, often internal narratives, they create emotional responses, because our emotions are responses to these inner stories. So if you're telling yourself a story about how terrible you are for all these different reasons, you're going to end up feeling bad. Whereas if you're telling yourself a story about how this situation is fantastic, you're going to feel good. Now, the model that we use for this is mapping the narratives and the beliefs, and then looking at the emotional needs that those narratives then make people perceive as being met or unmet in their lives. What then happens is, if we know that this narrative is creating a condition in which people perceive that their needs are not being met, or being met, it's either going to take them into negative feeling or positive feeling. But from there, that emotional response is going to limit and shape their thoughts. You could get into a negative loop or a positive loop. It's going to start biasing perception. That's then going to limit the options that people think that they have. So we've taken all the data in the world and then we're kind of filtering it through belief, through narrative, emotional response, thoughts, options, decisions, and then actions and behavior. So the emotional response that's coming from that narrative is going to drive our thinking, it's going to drive our perceiving of the world, and it's going to lead us to thinking that we've got these options or those options. And then when we're in those positions trying to make decisions, we're going to make the decision that makes us most likely feel that our emotional needs are being met. The one that makes us feel good. We want the outcome. And ultimately, the behavior is therefore shaped by emotion. So the relationship between emotion and behavior is huge. That relationship is inspired and is a response to narrative. Narrative is a product of our beliefs. Beliefs are a product of our paradigms. So when we're looking downstream at behavior and wanting to change behavior, what we really need to do is move upstream and look at narrative and emotional response and look at belief. So if we're segmenting our audiences based on belief, and then we're understanding and analysing what the narratives and the emotional responses look like within those different segments in relationship to the thing that we're trying to communicate to them, or how we're choosing to communicate with them, the sorts of experiences that we're looking to help them, it just makes sense to do this based on belief. Why would you do this based on demographics? It wouldn't work when we think about this, because it could very well be the case that, say, established liberals, you could have a 25-year-old established liberal and a 75-year-old established liberal. But if they share the same kind of beliefs about the world, the same kind of values about the world, then they're much, much more likely to respond more positively to narratives that fit with those beliefs and create emotional responses in them that fit with those beliefs, more so than if they were being categorized demographically with another 25-year-old who's actually a progressive activist or a loyal national. They've got very different mindsets, so age really doesn't make much difference. I think what usually is actually quite helpful in demographics is an indirect way of getting at this, because quite often when we look at demographics in terms of occupation, quite likely to have similar beliefs if you're in a shared occupation. Likewise with location sometimes. Less so in urban environments, but more so when we think about different pockets of the country where people might coalesce because they've got similar beliefs about the world, influencing where they choose to live because of the certain lifestyle that comes with living in those places. But why not just skip to the end and say let's use demographics where it's useful, but maybe as a subset of our segments once we've looked at them by belief first. By all means, segment them into belief and then start looking at it and breaking it down across demographics within that belief. So that's it for this video. That's the whole idea. Start segmenting based on belief. It's got far more power when it comes to narrative and driving actions and behaviours. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe. Share it with others, get the algorithm going so other people can see it. And yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. And if there's anything I can do to help you in terms of understanding people, belief, emotion, and so on, there'll be some way of getting hold of me, I'm sure, either around here or on LinkedIn, and just get me there. But until next time, thank you ever so much for your attention, and I'll see you next week.